Hello, Ben. Thank you for talking to me. This is a music podcast reminding from Montenegro. How are you?
I'm very good, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. You started as a street performer, right?
I did. Well, Dub FX started as a street performer.
Mm-hmm.
So before I was doing Dub FX, I was playing in different bands, in gigs and in clubs, the usual sort of thing. But then I probably started doing the very first gigs when I was 17, singing in bands and stuff. And then when I was about 23 is when I started street performing under the name Dub FX.
Mm. We witnessed today that YouTube allows the world to see a lot of great street performers and artists. When you first feel that breakthrough on big festivals, when you move up from the street and start to recognize you?
I think, well, right at the very, very beginning, when I was street performing in 2006 is when I started, I was already calling festivals, and when I was living in the UK in a van, and I was writing emails to festivals and saying, listen, I'm a street performer, this is some stuff, this is what I do. If you give me a free ticket, I'll just come with my street performing gear and I'll street perform around the festival. And so I was already getting gigs doing that. And then when I started doing that, the people that saw me there who had smaller stages were like, hey, come and perform on my stage. I've got a free slot. And then I started performing. And then, so it was really quick. I mean, I was also getting gigs in clubs really at the beginning, because they would see me street perform in the street, and promoters would say, hey, I've got this night. Do you want to come and perform on my night and come and perform in between my DJs? So I was always a mix of the two. I didn't just exclusively street perform. But when I started making really good money selling CDs on the street, like I was selling like 40, 50 CDs a day for 10 euros each. After that, when the promoters were like, hey, come and perform at 2 o'clock in the morning for 50 euros, I'd be like, nah, I'm going to just go street performing. So I had to, for a while there, I stopped and I kind of just waited for good gigs to come through. And then after about 2 years or 3 years of street performing a lot, then I started getting more gigs, like for better pay, and my name started to get out there and stuff.
Right. That's true DIY concept.
Yeah.
But also when you working on that big festivals, I know you also, when you finish that gigs on that festival, you come to street and play for the people.
Sometimes, yeah. There were a bunch of times where I did that, or I'd perform and do a show in a festival, and then like the next day I'd be out in the street doing something. But I had to be careful, because sometimes festivals want you exclusively just to perform for them. So you got, I broke the rules a couple of times, but usually I've got to sort of, I want them to book me again. So I can't be that bad,
Yeah. And what were your influences when you started? What music and genre, let's say?
So, well, I've always been into lots and lots of different genres from the very beginning. Back when I was like in the 90s, right, when I was in high school, there was 3 camps, and you could only be in one of those camps. There was the people who were into like dance music, techno, all that kind of stuff, house music and that. There was like electronic music. Then there was people who were into grunge and rock. And then there was the people who were into hip hop, and you had to choose which one. But I liked all of it. I thought it was all really good. So I was always outside the box then. But then when I started getting into like performing music and playing, I got really deep into like jazz and funk and soul. And, I went for, I mean, when I was a kid, I was into commercial shit like everybody else. I guess it was more grungy commercial stuff, like, Nirvana and Offspring and all that sort of stuff. And then, I got into like jazz and sort of, I guess you could say more like black music, like soul music. I loved Cuban jazz. I loved reggae music and samba and all that kind of stuff. And then by the time I was about 18, 19, I was in lots of different bands already. I was in a hip hop band. I was in a heavy metal band. I was in a jazz trio. I was also doing, did I say I was in a reggae band? I was in a reggae band. And then I was also emceeing over like house and tech music in clubs. And I was also doing acoustic stuff. So I had I was in lots of different bands all at around the same time. And that's why my music kind of has all of those elements. You know, I try to make my music soulful, but there's also a bit of heaviness in there. There's also a bit of electronic music kind of in there. There's also me toasting like you would as an MC in there, hip hop, rap styles. It's all a mishmash of that. There's a lot of dub style in there. So, you know, that's kind of why I'm in everything, you know, and there's a lot of improvisation as well because of all that jazz influence.
That would be what we know today as world music, some kind.
Yeah.
And where does that name, dub, is it from music genre or is it just fits you well?
Well, it's the dub effects is like, I mean, at the time when I was coming up with my style as dub effects, I was kind of trying to copy what dub producers were doing in the studio, but I was doing it in the live environment because I hadn't seen many artists at that time putting lots of effects over their vocals, you know, like the way the dub engineers would put big bass and reverbs over vocals. I always listened to these records and I was like, why don't people do that live? And so I put a microphone into a guitar pedal, which had all those effects. And I just started experimenting with that. And so it was kind of like dub effects is what I was experimenting with in a live situation. And so I just called myself that because that's what I was doing. So, you know, it's also paying homage to a really big hero of mine, Shy Effects, who kind of one of the beginnings of jungle. So there's a bit of homage to that as well. And also the fact that I just love dub music. So it's kind of just one of those things.
Your recent album is called Roots. Is it that recollection of your past and music when you started?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so when I told you, like when I got into like sort of the jazzy black style music, all that stuff, that I was really into all those genres, the dub, the reggae, the jazz, the samba, the Afrobeat. And so this album kind of really reflects all of those kind of things.
And your lyrics and your creative process, is it something that you see what's going on in the world? Did you collect those things in your songs, or you doing it separately, what you feel inside?
How do you mean? So what do you mean about the lyrics? I don't understand.
Do you write what's going on in the world, what current problems are, or you express yourself from the inside?
I mean, a lot of my music, a lot of the lyrics in my songs come from the same sort of, there's a very similar message in all my music. And that message is self-empowerment. I believe very much, like, I don't believe in like telling people what to do. And I don't believe in preaching a message or anything like that. But if you could distill my message, if I had one, it would be, you know, the idea that to work on yourself. And not, so rather than saying you should work on yourself in my music, I don't say that. I'm saying I want to work on myself. These are the things that I need to improve. This is what I'm working on. And that's what I'm sort of like, when you make it like that in the song, people kind of go, oh, he's working on this. Maybe I should think about that. And that's kind of where I'm going with it. And I believe that if everybody was to really work on themselves, on their consciousness, on their understanding of interactions, on what's going on in the media, what's going on in politics, you know, understand for themselves as opposed to being spoon-fed the information, everybody will start to make better decisions in the world. And the more that we feel empowered and energetically powerful, then the better the world can be. I don't believe that you tell people what to do. You got to make them understand it for themselves. And so that's what I'm trying to do, but through showing that I'm doing this self-discovery. That's what my lyrics are about.
And tomorrow, the Asia Dub Foundation album is coming out. You were a guest on one song. How you get to work with them?
That's a funny story. We met at a festival where it was a very dub themed festival. So there was Dub Effects, Asian Dub Foundation, and what was the other one? Dub Inc., I think it was. And, you know, so there are lots of different bands. And I don't know, we just started chatting and they were like, you know, we were just talking and hanging out. And the next thing a friend of mine who books me in Italy, his friend also books them. And he basically made us connect through for doing it. They were like reaching out to people they needed to do songs with, and they specifically asked for me. And I was like, yeah, of course. I mean, I remember Asian Dub Foundation from when I was like 19, 20 years old, you know, like they've been around for a really long time. So, you know, yeah, it was a really honor for them to call me and ask me to be part of it.
Yeah. Your life goal, let's say, is touring musician. Does it change when you got family, children? I know your stories with your van and touring around the world.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've been doing it for a very long time. I've been touring since I was 23 and I'm 37 now. So, you know, that's 15 years basically. It's not like anything new is happening anymore. It's like I've been doing it for a long time. I don't want to stop touring. I mean, and that's also how the only way that I can really make money. So right now with COVID, it's really shit. I can't make any money, and I need to provide for my family. Like, you know, that's the main thing. But, you know, I'm very lucky because my wife is really understanding and she's really amazing with our children and she's amazing with me. And, you know, so when I tour, I sometimes tour with the family, sometimes I tour by myself, but I try to find a balance and make sure that I'm not away from them for too long, basically.
Australia is a bit far from here, but you break through in Europe very, very early. People love you here. What's the main difference between music and how people react to it? Do you see some differences?
You mean between Europe and Australia?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't really have many fans in Australia, not like I do in Europe. My main fan base is Europe. And I think that's Australian audience, they're not really into the music that I make. They're not really into reggae or drum and bass or soul. There's a big neo soul scene actually and jazz scene, but it's not so much the dub kind of. I mean, there are people obviously that like it, but it's not a big enough scene to live off. You can't live off my music in Australia. There's no way. Whereas in Europe, it's like a very big genre, like the stuff, and more so than neo soul and folk. Here, Australians love folk music and they love rock and roll and they love techno and stuff that I'm not really that into. I love drum and bass. I like dub-based music, bassline music, and so, you know, that's what I do. So in Australia, I can't tour really.
That's interesting. And tell me how you synchronize all that gear that you have on stage with your singing, your performance? Is it something that you need to prepare early, or is it depend on situation or set list?
So no, I've got my live setup is something that I've been developing for the last 15 years, longer. I've been working with effects over my vocals for like 20 years, basically. So, you know, the main heart of my system is my microphone goes into an effects pedal, which is a GT10B. Then that goes into a loop station, and they are synchronized via MIDI, so everything's in time with each other. All my effects can go in time with the music. And then with that setup, I can pretty much do all my beatboxing and live looping and stuff. But then I also have a drum machine, which is called a Akai Force, which is like an MPC, but it's different. And I've used that to run extra tracks. Like if I want to go into different genres where I don't want to have to beatbox and I want to trigger drum loops or any kind of loops, like samples and effects and tracks of anything, backing vocals, whatever. So I run that and I'll have that synchronized as well. So I can make everything with my voice if I want to, or I can bring in other elements and make it a bit more, you know, because it gets a bit boring after a while. There's only so much you can do with the human voice for an hour. You know, it's like, I like to take the show and bring it up and up and up and up and up and up until it goes into like a really big thing. And by the end of it, it's mostly samples because that's how you get that sound. But you know, you can bring it up and down anyway. That's the main bulk of what I do.
Mm-hmm. And how you think in future how your music would develop in terms of those technical stuff? The digitalization is improving in all spheres of life. How you see your music would develop in future? Would be the same or?
Well, you know, I think technology is amazing for helping innovating things. Like, I mean, the loop station, for example, is an amazing piece of, you know, hardware and software that's enabled me to do what I do for live stuff. But I don't really think about it from, I don't like take a piece of technology and say, how can I use this in my thing? Mm-hmm. I'm more like come up with a concept, an idea, and then I say, okay, what do I need to do that? So I start with, for me, it's begin with the art, and then whatever I need to execute that, I'll find whatever that is. You know, I know some people go the other way. They're like, oh, I need to find, I've got this thing, let's see what it does. And they experiment with it, they create some sounds, and then they use that as I'm the other way around. I've got a vision already, and I just find the things that I need in order to execute that vision. And a lot of the time, for me, like the most important thing is, how do I give the audience the best possible performance? Like for me, it's all about, you know, most of it is not even the technology. It's my presence. It's my ability to transmit my energy into the crowd. And that is, everything that I use is to support that, you know? It's not like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's more about, I'm trying to perform my soul and my art to the audience. And if the easiest way to do that for a particular situation is with a guitar, I'll use a guitar. If it's for a different song, I need it because it has to be with a DJ because I need the beats and stuff, I'll use that. If it's, I need to do a looping thing, then I use that. But I kind of start with what's my intention and what's the message, what's the transmission, and then what do I need to execute that as best possible without using as much gear as minimal gear as possible to get the biggest sound possible. And yes, technology advancing can make things a lot simpler and easier. But you know, yeah, like I said, the technology is the secondary to me.
Right. And for the end, let me ask you about comics. It's one of the part of your artist feeling.
Yeah, I love comic books. I grew up reading. Well, I didn't grow up reading them when I was a kid. I actually discovered comic books, graphic novels later in life when I was actually like 18, 19. I got into like the more adult ones, would be really intense. And you know, I love those kind of comics, like the ones that are they're not like childish stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been into them. You know, it's something that I enjoy and I love reading. And yeah, I always thought to myself that I wanted to write a comic book, you know, one day. Never knew how or why or what I could do. But then when I was doing this album Roots, I came up with some ideas. I was like, well, why don't I come up with some music videos? So I started like writing like a script for a music video. And then I'm like, well, maybe I could turn this music video into a comic instead, you know, because then I could do one for each song instead of just having two music videos for my album. I could actually do a comic book for every single song on the album, and then I could just animate those for the singles. So that's what we did basically, and it was a really fun experiment, and it made me really want to write comic books properly about one day. But I'm just waiting to see if anyone enjoys it, and you know, it was just a bit of fun.
Right. Ben, that's it for this time. Thank you very much for talking to us. I hope to see you in Montenegro soon.
Thank you so much for having me, man. Big up yourself. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Man.